Hello there, Reef friends. Welcome back to Craft Aquatic. I'm Matt G. In today's video, I'd like to show you 12 of my current favorite coral in the 120-gallon mixed reef, with a couple honorable mentions thrown in. There are those special pieces that every time I see them, I am so glad that I purchased that initial frag and grew it out. Now, some of the coral that I have chosen will be high-end, high-price examples, while others are going to be affordable, more common pieces. But in either case, they are something that, to me, makes a statement, creates a focal point, adds movement, or just feels like a hidden treasure waiting to be found. If you enjoyed this video, please do take the time to hit the thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. If you want to learn more about this 120-gallon mixed reef, I'll put a link to a full tour in the description below. Here we go.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
This mixed reef is chock full of colorful coral. I'd say about 50-50 LPS to SBS at this point. I'd like to start with a classic Chalice coral, something you may have seen in a reef or two. This is a Miami Hurricane Chalice that has been in this tank for almost 2 years now. It is one of those pieces that I sort of stuck in an empty cave and forgot about until recently. I was doing some rescaping and realized it was back there and just looking incredible, so I cleared a bit of space around it so it could be seen better. It has taken on a rich teal and navy blue hue, and the mouths have developed 3 shades of orange with a hint of green and yellow. Just spectacular and much nicer than when I first put it in. In the middle of this frame is a small colony of red robin staghorn Acropora. Now, this is something that was given to me by Chris, a local reefer, and has become one of my favorite SBS mini colonies. There's something about gifted coral that just tends to make it special anyway. Under blue light, you can see the delicate red and amber hues, and they become richer around the more established areas of the coral. It displays lovely polyp extension and sort of resembles how my PC Rainbow looks at the moment. PC Rainbows will shift color based on placement. I haven't moved the red robin around, so I'm not exactly sure if it would do the same thing. Leave a comment below if you have experience to know the answer to that. Directly behind the red robin, we have one of the only leathers in this tank, a Palau Neon Green Nepthia. The other leather in here is the common Nepthia right next to it. You can see the difference in color, depth, and density, and it is quite spectacular in comparison. According to several resources, this coral can no longer be found in its natural habitat, which just makes it all the more special and important as a captive specimen. It is one of those coral that grabs your attention through cracks and crevices in the rockwork, since it is tucked away in the back of the 120, which is intentionally left open for the big tanks. I'm not specifically a collector of leather coral, but given the color and motion this adds to the display, it takes a solid number 3 on this top 12 list. Okay, maybe this list isn't exactly in order because this fire red Goniopora colony is one of the pride and joys of this reef display. Purchased as a tiny frag about 2 years ago from Manhattan Aquariums in NYC. If you've been around this hobby long enough, you know that the Goniopora were considered one of the most impossible species to keep in captivity, and now we have colors like this, which surprisingly are more resilient than the typical green variations that would wither away in aquariums of the past. One of the benefits of having Goniopora in this mixed reef is how it adds movement down low. Most coral with tentacles tend to need to be up high in the display to give them space, while Goniopora prefers to be placed on or near the substrate. To me, that makes this a prime candidate for a mixed reef. Speaking of movement, here's another beauty, my IndoGold Aphelio. This was a trade and not purchased as one of the ultra high priced name torches, but I've noticed that over the years, some of those colors that make the very expensive torches so sought after are starting to develop in this particular coral. I do wonder, if left alone, if this torch will continue to develop more color complexity. Either way, I'm very happy with it. Let me know what you think in the comments below, especially if you have observed the same phenomenon with your Aphelio. Here's the first of 2 honorable mentions. I purchased this Pinktip Elegance coral from Hudson Valley Fish and Reef last year. It came as a chunk cut from a larger colony using a diamond bandsaw. It's incredible to me that we now not only can keep this previously impossible to maintain LPS coral, but it can be fragged up and shared as well. I decided to place it vertically rather than horizontally like it is typically seen. It's just another one of those coral that is a bit different and adds some motion to this reef display. Here we have one of the most common Gargonia found in the hobby. This is an Ore Grubes Gargonian that was given to me by Randy, a local reefer with one of the longest running reef systems I have ever seen in person. He was actually handing out handfuls of this coral at a local frag swap a few years back. I've received some really nice pieces from a few other local reefers as well. Mark, Adam, and Carlos, you know I'm talking about you, and I already mentioned Chris. I've always appreciated seeing Gargonia swaying in the background of SPS aquariums and wanted something that was easy to care for that didn't have special feeding requirements. The Grubes Gargonian is peaceful when in close proximity to other types of coral, so it is great for filling in some of that negative space. Up next, we have my two display-sized WWC OG Bounce Mushrooms, which are actually a type of Rhodactis corallomorph. This is a direct descendant of the coral that sold for $6,000 at Reefapalooza in 2015. It is much more accessible now, though it is still a pretty expensive coral, but in my opinion, it is worth the price of entry. Number one, no, it does not lose those orange and green vesicles that make it so spectacular. If anything, they just get bigger, bouncier, and more colorful, which is absolutely awesome. There's nothing else like it in the hobby. Love it or hate it, it is very different than anything else. Number two, if you keep it healthy and happy, this coral does naturally reproduce. I initially paid a lot for it, but I have since sold some of its offspring so that it not only looks really cool, but helps to pay for the salt and consumables that keep this aquarium ticking. If you've been in the hobby for any amount of time, you most likely recognize Mataporo Setosa when you see it. This is one of the coral that started my passion for keeping small polyp stony or SPS coral. It's not the easiest type of Matapora to keep, but once healthy will display this rich orange hue and smooth skin that is very different than any other type of Matapora. It takes me back to that little piece of red Matapora digitata that I had back in my apartment in Brooklyn in 2003. I was so proud to have a piece of thriving SPS in my aquarium. Once I became a little more advanced as a hobbyist, I started to build a tank full of Matapora digitata and Capricornus, and this Setosa hails from that original colony. Here's my second honorable mention, this red Cinerina that I purchased from our LFS Aquarium Solutions 101 here in the Hudson Valley. I've had my eye on this particular coral for several years, but worried a little that the meaty tissue would be blown off by the strong current in this SPS heavy reef. I placed it on the substrate to start, and it did okay, but really puffed up and deepened in color when I repositioned it on this ledge. Moving on to another SPS colony in this tank, this is my Jason Fox Homewrecker Tenuis. Depending on where you live and the availability of this coral, it can be extremely expensive for a frag. This started as a very slow grower for me. It is tricky to successfully frag off a piece, but once placed and left alone in an area of the tank with high power and good flow, it is really colored up. If you are going to purchase one, I suggest that it is a healthy, colorful frag for the highest probability of success. One of my favorite things about this particular Tenuis is how different but equally beautiful it looks under blue light and white light, especially when viewed from above. Speaking of coral that are challenging to frag, here is one of my absolute all-time favorite LPS coral. This is a Space Invader Pectinia. I like to make sure that I have at least one backup of all of my coral in the downstairs frag tank, so I've tried to frag the Space Invader Pectinia 4 times. I now have one thriving remote frag of it in the Rack and Rubble frag tank. I'll put a link to a video about that system in the description below. I believe the trick is to take a very large chunk once the colony has reached at least 4 inches in diameter. Anyway, you'll see where I fragged it in this footage. What sets this Pectinia off for me is the combination of deep green with the orange mells. I saw a Space Invader Pectinia in a video about the Jason Fox Coral Farm years back and knew I needed one right away. It did take several years to acquire, has been a very slow grower, and does put out stinger tentacles, so I have to give it a little space to invade, but it doesn't matter, I really love this coral. I very much enjoy reef systems that are designed with caves, branches, and little crevices where coral can be tucked away like a little treasure. I suppose it's fitting that these golden yellow Acenthastry are not immediately visible. It feels like discovering a gold nugget, except this one grows bigger over time. There's a bit of green mixed in with the yellow, so is the only green and yellow coral in this reef display. Here I'm showing you some footage down in the coral farm where you can see an all green acan growing next to the yellow variety. I focused so much on SPS over the years. This is my first time having success with Acenthastry, grown from small frags. I'm sure some of you die-hard collectors are unimpressed, but for me, this is a success and a nice distraction from the coral I typically gravitate towards. I'll show you one more angle here, and we'll move on to the last coral on today's list. So we've made it to the end, and I saved my oldest Millipora for last. This is a coral that I handpicked from a collection of wild Millipora about 10 years ago. It's gone through a variety of color iterations and has finally settled on this deep pink, peach, and purple body with yellow polyps and a blue-green boundary. It looks light pink under white light and more complex under blue, which is typical for SPS. I do tend to like both versions for most coral that do this. Back when I chose it, it was because of the yellow polyps, which I had never seen on a Millipora before. It has become much nicer over the years. It is the first coral I have named so far. I call it the multimedia Millipora, since nice strains like this that have been in the hobby for an extended period really deserve a way to follow the lineage. I do plan on spreading the multimedia Millipora around, but for now I'm very much enjoying it up top in a high par, high flow area of my mixed reef. So those are my 12 favorite coral, at least at the time of making this video, with 2 runners-up. It wasn't easy to choose out of the well over 100 different coral in this mixed reef, and I guarantee as some of the newer frags grow in, this list will change a bit. Rest assured, I'll do an update in a year or so. Everything is always growing and evolving in a reef aquarium, which is part of what makes this hobby so exciting. I'd love to hear, number 1, what your favorite coral is in this video, and number 2, what your favorite coral is in your reef aquarium at the moment. Please share in the comments below. You never know how valuable this information will be to another hobbyist unless you do. Thank you again for taking the time to check out Craft Aquatic. If you like what this channel has to offer, be sure to check out all of the other videos, hit the notification bell for future uploads, and maybe consider sharing it with a friend or fellow hobbyist. Perhaps somebody you are trying to convince to start a reef tank. Maybe it will give them that little nudge they need. I'll see you in the next one.